In His presence lived my precious Savior, suffered pain and agony. He bore it all, that I might live. He broke the bonds of sin and set the captive free.
He bore it all that I might live.
In His presence live. He bore it all, that I might see His shining face.
He bore it
freely
all,
bore it all,
that I might live.
I with Him might live. I stood condemned. He took my place.
He bore it all,
that I might
live.
in His presence live. They placed a crown of thorns upon my Savior's head. He bore it all, that I might live. I with Him might live. My cruel man with spear, His side was pierced and bled.
He bore it all,
that I might
live.
in His presence live. He bore it all, that I might see His shining face.
He bore it
freely
all,
bore it all,
that I might live.
I with Him might live. I stood condemned. He took my place.
He bore it all,
that I might
live.
in His presence live. Up Calvary's hill in shame, the blessed Savior trod. He bore it all, that I might live. Between two thieves they crucified the Son of God.
He bore it all,
that I might in His presence live. He bore it all, that I might see His shining face.
He bore it
freely bore it all,
that I might
I with Him might live. I stood condemned. He took my place.
He bore it all,
that I might in His presence live. He bore it all, that I might see His shining face.
He bore it
freely bore it all,
that I might
I with Him might live. I stood condemned. Jesus took my place.
He bore it all that I might live.
In His presence live.
Some glad morning when this life is o'er, I'll fly away,
got to fly away
to a home on God's celestial shore. I'll fly away,
got to fly away.
Oh,
I'll fly
fly away,
got to fly
oh
away.
glory,
I'll fly
away,
got to fly away.
When I die, hallelujah,
Oh,
by and by, I'll fly away,
got to fly away.
Just a few more weary days and then, whoa, I'll fly away,
got to fly away.
to a land where joy shall not end.
I'll fly away,
fly away,
got to fly away.
yes,
I'll fly away,
fly away,
got to fly
oh,
away.
glory,
I'll fly away,
fly away,
got to fly away.
I said when
I
die,
die,
hallelujah,
Oh, hallelujah, by and by.
I'll fly away,
Got to fly away.
oh, I'll fly away, oh glory,
I'll fly away, got to fly away.
Yes, and when
I
die, hallelujah,
Oh, hallelujah, by and by.
I'll fly away,
Got to fly away. Fly away. Would you be free from the burden of sin? There's power in the blood, power in the blood. Would you worry then a victory to win? There's wonderful power in the blood. There is power, wonder-working power in the blood of the Lamb. There is power, wonder-working power in the precious blood of the Lamb. Would you be free from your passion and your pride? Power in the blood, power in the blood. Come for a cleansing to Calvary's tide. There's wonderful power in the blood. There is power, wonder-working power in the blood of the Lamb. There is power, wonder.
everybody. Thanks for joining us. This is Brett and Miranda again, as if you don't know. Perhaps you don't know, but if you didn't know, you know now.
Yes, they do. Thank you for sharing this, deep wisdom with the world.
We were just actually checking the weather, and it's supposed to be storming right now, and yet the sun is out and shining. So much. The weather prediction here in Texas is the same as it is in Nebraska. It is 50-50 chance it's actually going to be accurate.
Maybe. Then again, it's currently isolated thunderstorms.
Isolated, yes.
So
maybe it's thunderstorming in, I don't know, Dallas or something, but not here anyway. So, interesting, we got the weather report from Colorado, where Miranda's sister lives. They're getting a dumping of snow.
Yes, well, actually, she lives near Fort Collins. They were supposed to have 2 inches yesterday, I think. I'm not exactly sure. She usually keeps me updated. I don't know if they got that or not, but it was snowing there. And Aspen has an online school friend who lives in Evergreen, Colorado, and apparently they got a foot of snow. And it crashed in his mom's greenhouse. Not fun.
So, lots of snow.
It's good for Asher, though.
Oh, it's good for Asher, snow day or something?
No.
Oh.
He gets to ski.
He gets to ski and snowboard there in Colorado in May.
Yeah, and as he says, fresh pow-pow on the Mau-Mau.
So we're going to start today's broadcast with the common man's treat, toast.
Yes, toast.
Toast. One of man's most miraculous mechanical inventions, actually even as powerful as the light bulb. And that perhaps you aren't aware of the history of toast making here in America.
Apparently I'm not.
Toast making rivaling the inventions and inventiveness of the light bulb. Yes, so the simple, humble piece of toast has become fairly more prominent in our household of late, because we've kind of got it worked out that when my blood sugar is low, a piece of peanut butter toast with pear is just about right. Now, don't judge me, because I judge you right back. Pear on peanut butter toast is amazing.
See, I knew this bit of wisdom back when I was a kid.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, we had some pears that were just about too ripe. But my mom, of course, being thrifty, didn't want to throw them out. And they weren't spoiled or anything. So she made us peanut butter toast, and she mashed up the pear. It must have been a Bartlett because it was soft. Mashed up the pear and put it on there. It was so tasty.
It was really good. I was surprised. And I like pear, and I like peanut butter toast. I never just put the two of them together, but that was really good. I mean, putting it on, it was really good. And Bartlett's are okay, but Miranda's turned me on to a new pear.
Packham pears. If you're in the store and you see Packham pears, just buy them because they're really good.
Really are.
And yeah.
Yeah, sometimes you think, oh, pear's a pear, and in this case, it's not.
Yeah, plus we found a new one at Whole Foods yesterday, and I don't remember the name of it, but it had some fancy French-sounding name. So we're going to try some new pears. They're pretty, too. Kind of had a longer neck on them.
La Pear is what it was. Yeah, that was the French version. La Pear. A la pear. Anyway, back to toast. So,
Oh, wait. One more thing. Still talking about toast and toast toppings. Brett, I turned him on to it. He doesn't like it as much as pears and peanut butter. But avocado, equal amounts of smashed avocado with smashed banana, and you mix that up, and you put it on your toast. It's like the best thing ever.
I was skeptical. And honestly, my first bite was, it was a weird experience, because the more I ate, the better it tasted. And by the end, I was like, this is really good. I think I had to get over my mental block to begin with.
Honestly, it was in one cookbook I had, and they had a list of sandwiches you could make, and one of them was that, and I was just like, I can't do it. No, not that one. I'd read it every now and again. I just, I don't know why, but one day I decided to try it and loved it ever since. Oh, and then you sprinkle just a little bit of salt on top of it.
Yeah. So that was really good. Although avocado, I think, is fat, right? Mm-hmm. So that doesn't help me protein-wise or anything. It's just...
But it's still a fat.
Still a fat. Mm-hmm. So it's we're figuring out all the great diabetic snacks and foods to eat, and coming up with.
By the way, though, we're not a cooking show.
No, we're not a cooking show, but we could be the
In case you've-
diabetic cooking show.
In case you've never seen us before, we're not a cooking
Not a
show.
cooking show, but I will have to say, I'm eating better than I ever have, and it's actually really good. I don't think I haven't had sugar since I went in the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
How long ago?
It's been at least 3 weeks,
3
I think,
weeks.
since you went in the hospital. 'Cause you spent 1 week almost there, about 4 days
Yeah.
in, but it took up all week basically, and then 2 weeks out now.
Yeah, and so I did get my first sugar, and it wasn't overwhelming, but it was like, I'm gonna miss this. We bought donuts for Sabbath school. How long did the donuts last, Aspen?
There was about like 6 left when Sabbath school ended, and
Yeah.
there was 1 donut left when I left Sabbath school,
One
and
donut
Pastor
left.
Erica just threw it away.
What?
She threw away Brett's donut. She threw away your donut, Brett.
Oh.
You'll have to go in and yell at her next week.
Yes, well, I was saying, like, probably I could have 1 bite of a donut and that's it. But I did look at them and go, I'm going to miss that.
Well,
you
they weren't like Krispy Kreme or something
No.
like
They
that.
weren't
We
good.
just went to Walmart. We're sorry, that's all we could afford for the kids.
So,
But
anyway, I don't know how we got off on this. It's been an interesting, like, the meals have been, Miranda's found a bunch of stuff and really cooked a bunch of stuff. Like, I had this with the barbecue chicken. Was that what it was?
it was like a smoked chicken.
Smoked chicken, and actually I had a cup of white rice and green beans, and that was good. And
Yeah, he's been eating whole grains, so the white
Yeah.
rice was.
a treat. But really, other than that, unless I see it, I don't really miss it. And still, when I see a soda, I get a physical, my stomach kind of turns a little bit. Like, I get the feeling how I felt just before I went to the hospital. And that was not a good feeling. And anyway, I don't know why we're talking about this. Back to toast.
Yes, toast.
Keep coming back. So, early in
And
the
toast,
days...
the toast is going to have a point.
The
by
toast
way.
does have a
Yes.
point, yes. Early days of toasting were not kind to humanity. I don't know whose idea it was first to put bread on fire. Maybe someone just dropped it in the coals and like, oh, look, toast. But they had to use something that was akin to what we have called camping forks. They were kind of long prong forks and had a little bit of a handle to them, and they would just simply hold them close to the fire, over some heat source, and that's how they would make their toast, much like roasting a marshmallow. That was the only way to do it. It wasn't very efficient, though, as in the marshmallows burst into flames. The toast didn't really brown. It kind of went from bread to dried out bread without actually toasting it, dried it out. Interestingly, because it took so long. It would dry the bread out. And that's going to play into when I get down to today's modern toaster. Anyway, humanity, not willing to live without their toast, came up with the next invention. So it was early 19th century. And somebody invented what was called the sad iron heater. Now, we don't know what sad stood for. We don't think it was reflective on their opinion of the apparatus, but it meant something in the day. But it was used as both an iron, and they would try to make toast with it. Much as people might use irons today and make grilled cheese, they did the same thing back then. It's like, here's a fun thing, and you can iron your clothes and make toast. And it didn't work so well, especially if you were ironing, toasting, crumbs everywhere. Anyway, after that, the invention of the stove came along, and they came up with, it's sort of a flat wire grill thing that you would put on top of your stove, be it a gas stove or electric stove, and you would put the bread on top of that. And again, it was a slow process because it was it was just the stove itself heating up the little iron grill there and then trying to toast the bread. Didn't work real well. Again, it would dry everything out, and by the end you had a dried piece of bread that had some browning on it. Finally, again, late in the 19th century, the reliable toaster was invented. And it looks like something from a steampunk television show, but it was an actual toaster, several of them. And this was actually in use for a long time, where they had finally put these wires together and a place where you could lay the bread on, and it would toast your bread, not real accurately, and it wasn't very consistent. Your toast would change from time to time, from use to use. And another downside is it only did one side. So you'd have one side of toast, and if you flipped it around, then you could have the other side, but then the first side was cold by then, and it was problematic at best, but better than holding over the campfire. So this actually was around for quite a while, 10, 20 years before the next great technological leap in the art of toast making came about. And in 1893, a Scotsman named Allan McMasters created the Eclipse Toast, Eclipse toasters, and that was this was the interesting thing. So this is why I say it was a mechanical marvel. So the problem they were having was that with the early toasters, they were using these wires and stuff. Well, if you look at your toaster now, you'll put a toaster and you see it heats up and it glows, right? Really, really fast. So the problem was trying to find a metal that could withstand intense temperatures on an ongoing basis, off and on, because, you'd use your toaster, and so nothing they found could handle the temperatures without eventually, melting through and breaking. And so they didn't, they were not really reliable until this guy invented, I forget what, nickelum or something he called it, and it was like Edison finally found the filament that lasted the longest in the light bulb. He found the type of metal, or made it, that could do that, withstand those big high temperatures quickly off and on. And so he created his, and it worked. It was still a little problem. It still only did one side, but that was the hurdle they overcame at that point, which opened the door for all new toasters. Let's see. In 1919, a guy named Charles Strite, he invented the first pop-up toaster, which did both sides of the bread. So for the first time, we had a toaster that you could put in that would stand the element would stand the heating, on it, and it would also do both sides of the bread. And so in 1926, the Great Toastmaster came out, which was an American ripoff of the McMaster's toaster, which we do in America, all great American inventions, stealing ideas from someone else and making them your own. And he came up with the Toastmaster, which was actually used in the restaurant business for a long time. But there was still one problem.
And what was that, Brett?
I'm glad you asked. Bread came in loaves.
Yes, as all good bread does.
As all good bread does. But now today, when you buy a piece of bread, a loaf of bread, it comes sliced.
Yes.
But not so
Oh.
when they had these toasters. You had to hand slice. If you wanted toast, you had to hand slice the bread, as everybody did. And of course, some people's toast was thinner and some was thicker and all different things. And so it also depended on, how you cut your bread as to if the toaster would work or not. Because thicker pieces and thin pieces tended to burn up and all that kind of stuff. But in July 7, 1928, the invention of sliced bread. And Aspen should be showing you one of the first bread slicing machines. And I believe it was invented by a jeweler, of all things, who came up with the idea. And they would have women sit at the tables, and as the loaves of bread came through, they would run them through this slicer and it would slice the bread up. And
there was a health food store in Maryland that they had homemade bread by the Amish, and it was just in a whole loaf. And if you wanted a slice, they had a slicer. You could take it to somebody there, and they would slice it for you. It was kind of fun to watch.
The modern slicers today are actually not far removed from the original slicer. They still do the same thing. They push the bread through a gate. It's just the blades now are, I think, thin hot wires, and whoosh. Back then they had the serrated, and it actually cut through it, and now they just go smooth through it. But it's the same basic apparatus. They just push the bread through. And to let you know, this wasn't that far removed in our history. As probably a lot of you know, one of the jokes about Betty White. Betty White used to say she's older than sliced bread, because people, it's like, wow, that's older than sliced bread. Betty White actually was older than sliced bread. She was born on January 17, 1922. So 6 years before the invention of sliced bread. Betty White, who I think she died just
recently.
A year ago?
Within the last year.
Yeah.
No, wait.
Oh, that's right.
Last year in December. I think it was New Year's.
Last year.
It was very end of the year, beginning of the year or something, yeah.
She was 99 years old, and it was just before her birthday. She was just about to turn 100. And so, yeah, that used to be her joke. I'm older than sliced bread. And so that's how recent it was in our history that we've actually had sliced bread. And that is kind of the history. Nowadays, we have pretty much the same basic structure of a toaster, except I was looking on for the best toasters to get, and I think we just got a toaster.
Yes, because Brett got tired of my style of making toast.
No.
Yes. We actually have a toaster oven. I know
Yes.
we had a toaster somewhere, but who knows where it's at now. And
It has the same problem as the early toasters.
the older toaster that we
The
have?
toaster oven.
Oh, the toaster oven.
It does
Right.
one side.
It toasts one side. But then, you're scrambling your eggs or whatever, and then you're like, oh, let me see, is it done yet? And so you flip it over to the other side, and it could be perfect. It could be a little too dark. It could be not quite dark enough. But, it worked.
It worked. And but anyway, we bought it, and
Yeah.
it was, I think I only got it was like $18-20.
Yeah.
The toaster that I didn't purchase, I got this one instead, was a very modern toaster that Aspen could show, and it sold for $398.
That's all right. This one works fine. So it has been a learning curve, though, because it has settings from 1 to 6.
Yeah.
And so it came set on 3.
Yeah.
So you would think that's perfect, right? Right there in the middle. No, that pretty well burnt your toast.
Yeah.
And so then I went to 1, and that barely touched it. 2 made it about the way Brett likes it. I mean, honestly, I will intentionally burn my toast on occasion. Not always, but on occasion. Brett doesn't like it that way at all.
But this modern toaster, the $398 one, you wouldn't have that problem because that is a touch screen where you can tell it exactly what color you want your toast. What shade of golden brown do you want, all the way up to black burnt, I guess. And it also does, 3D. Oh, well, I was supposed to do, the thaw, frozen, and so. And it has a little sensor. It says, "Oh, time to empty the bottom tray." Really though, and you get down to it, the only difference this toaster has over even some of these early toasters, it has an internal sensor. So it can tell, that's why it can be so accurate, it can tell what the temperature is and how long it's been, and it can give you more accurate toasting specificity, specificity, however you say that. And that's really, but so from $20 to $400, the only real difference is a touchscreen and the internal sensor, and that's crazy.
Well, I'm sure little kid me would have been thoroughly impressed with that. Because our toaster, while I'm sure at one time worked fairly well, honestly, I can't even remember any settings on it right this second. What happened is it didn't pop up on its own one way or the other. It wouldn't pop up on its own. And I think actually the little, the handle thing that you press down on, that was missing, so you just had this narrow metal thing, which would heat up, by the way, while the toaster was heating up. So yeah, you'd press it down, and every now and again you'd smell your toast was done. Or you just make a good guess, pop it up.
So, as Miranda mentioned, I like my toast like brown, golden brown on both sides, and Miranda doesn't. Miranda, there's no words for it. The way
What?
she eats
A
her
little
toast.
scorched, there's nothing wrong with it. It just adds a little extra flavor.
Yes, char. So
It's smoked.
I could just
smoked
take a
bread.
charcoal and scratch it and just sprinkle on her toast.
I
She
don't
would
think it'd
love
be the
it.
same.
Yes, she likes her things a
Not-
little bit darker than I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I always try to make his toast the way he likes it.
Yeah.
But still, it was a bit of a journey this week trying to figure it out. We still haven't got all the settings figured out for like waffles and such versus toast
Yeah.
and such. So he started out with a pretty dark piece of toast because you think 3 would be perfect,
Yeah.
but it wasn't.
And it wasn't. No. You may be wondering why we're talking about toast. Because there's your history of toast. So let us know how you like your toast. Golden brown, burnt, or somewhere in between. Or if you have any great toast recipes. We've given you peanut butter and avocado. And remember, that's a half and half mix. Equal
it's-
banana, equal avocado.
Yes.
And peanut butter and pear. Both of those really good. So
On toast,
on toast. Let us know if you have any.
whether it's burnt or not.
Yeah, golden brown toast. Well, then you cover it up with peanut butter. It doesn't matter, I guess. But there's actually a point to all this. And
Right.
now Miranda will expound upon
it's
that point.
because the toaster thing has been a journey in our
It
lives,
has been a journey.
especially this last week here.
Yeah.
And so what we're talking about today is about a journey.
Yep.
And it includes Abraham and the rich young ruler, and the main point, of course, ending with the Jesus washing the disciples' feet in John 13, since we're still in the book of John and we're still talking about the theme of come follow me. And the come follow me is a journey.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
I should mention also, if Kathy, you're watching, I remember Dad liked his toast in the oven. And it actually was really good that way. I don't know how, but
Right.
they put it in the oven.
He liked the Zwieback, where it dries out
Yeah,
to
yeah.
a hard crisp.
Yeah, that's how he
Yeah.
liked his. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. So we're getting started with our
Yes,
talk
so
today. Okay.
we're taking the toast thing and being in a journey and jumping into the journey of faith.
Yes. Okay. So while we are talking about Jesus washing the disciples' feet in John 13, in order to lead up to that, we're going to use the story of Abraham sacrificing his son,
So
or
Abraham-
preparing to sacrifice his son,
Right.
and how that story actually parallels the story of the rich young ruler. Now you have the story of the rich young ruler. I know we've been including him in the last several times I've been talking just a little bit because he was one of the people that Jesus said, "Come follow me," and he chose not to. Well,
Yeah, remember that was like the invitation like he gave to Peter, James, and John. It was come be a disciple, and the rich young ruler is the only one we know of that turned him down.
yeah. So Jesus asked him to give up his wealth and his status, basically, and also what would be his perception of his relationship with God, because his wealth, because he had wealth, he was considered very blessed by God and favored by God.
Yeah, so that's a good note to hit, that in that culture back in that day, that if you had wealth, if you were well off, and the people really did think, okay, there's a good person who's been blessed by God, and if you were poor, if you were lower class, you were whatever, you were considered cursed, or you were doing something wrong, or obviously God was withholding blessings for some reason. And it was very much the prosperity gospel in its early days. But that's exactly what the rich young, that was his wealth would have had a lot to do with his belief on his relationship with God.
Right, so basically, Jesus wanted the rich young ruler to get rid of everything that defined who he thought he was. Now separate the rich young ruler from his wealth, his status, and who he believes and what he believes his relationship with God is.
Right.
And so now that you've separated him from that, he won't even know who he is. He doesn't recognize who he is without all this stuff. And so, but Jesus, of course, he knows that once that happens, once he separates himself from that, he may not know who he is, but Jesus created him. So therefore, Jesus wants to take him on this journey. He says, "Come follow me." And in the process of that, he will learn exactly who God created him to be. And it for him, it did not involve, the wealth and the status and such like that. So,
Yeah. So his whole being, his whole thing would have been, the family that he was in, the title he received by being in that family, a ruler of some, and the wealth associated. All those three things he grew up with So they were intricately woven into his perception of everything. His own self-identity, his own relationship with God, his relationship to the world was bound by those things. And Jesus was saying, get rid of all that, which would have left him very much in that place of, then who and what am I? And it was basically break him down so he could build him back up.
Yes, and the thing was, you're right, who was he without that? And all he could see was not good stuff.
Yeah, nothing.
Yeah, not good stuff, but that's the whole thing, is to follow Jesus, even though you can't see beyond what he has said of come follow me.
Mm-hmm.
So okay, so how does the story of Abraham relate to that story? Well, you have Abraham, and God asks him, I mean, Abraham had wealth, and he probably had some status, that went along with that. It just happens to go that way. And but Jesus said for him, he says, now I want you to sacrifice your son Isaac to me. Now, think about it. Isaac had to represent who Abraham identified himself to be.
Yeah, you have to back up, and he told Abraham go, and he went, and all this journey of Abraham, began with a promise of, I'm going to give you a son, and he will be the father of nations. And so when you read the story of Abraham, all those years, all those events, all that, everything, the one ongoing promise was, you will have a son. This son will be the father of nations, and I'm going to bless you with a son. And so it wasn't, a spontaneous event in the end. This was, his whole life was looking towards this promise to be fulfilled. And then they had, they obviously Ishmael and everything, and had Isaac, and then naturally, and then God was saying, give up the thing that you have been looking for your entire life.
Yes. I mean, this was who he was at the moment. It was his son. It was also his future. It was Abraham's future, because this was his son who was going to give him the great nation that God promised that he would have. Yeah. And then not only that, it also touched on his relationship with God, because God had given him Isaac, and it represented the fulfillment of that promise. And so now God wants him to destroy that and get rid of it, give it up. But, if that last story in Abraham's life was not recorded, and we looked at all the other faith-building stories that Abraham had, we would not consider Abraham a man of faith. We just would not, because all of them did not end up with Abraham doing the right thing. Yeah. God was always there. God was always faithful to him, and Abraham learned from that. And that was why when he came to this situation, when God once again said something a little bit crazy, at least that's what it looked like to Abraham, he decided that for once he was just going to go ahead and trust that whatever God asked him to do was the right thing that he needed to do.
What did God say it was crazy?
Well, go sacrifice your son.
Oh, go
yeah, your future, the gift I gave you, the promise fulfilled. Just go get rid of it.
So, all that leading up, you're right. It was, first of all, he lied to Pharaoh about Sarah once, and then that was for complications, and God worked it out, and because he learned so well, he did it again, twice, and and then later there was, God needs our help, so we'll have Ishmael. And over again, you find this, falling short. Like you say, you would not look at his life and go, well, here's a successful man of faith. I mean, I'm sure there are great things of faith in there, but there was a failure over and over and over again. And even when when God promised the son to begin with, he and Sarah both laughed. They didn't believe. And finally, you get him down to the end of his life, and then, God says, there's going to be a son, and at this point, it's like, well, you're the only one that can do this now, God. And they have Isaac. And now Abraham's got to be thinking, so I'm not the guy here. My son is, and it's my job to have a son and then raise this son and teach him about God. I mean, now Abraham's existence and meaning in life is wrapped up in Isaac as well.
Absolutely.
Because
he's waited
for this.
His 100 years almost,
Yeah.
His whole adult life, he's been waiting to have that son.
Yeah.
And
then God says the crazy thing, now go sacrifice Isaac.
yeah. And so this ends. So basically, okay, when Jesus called the rich young ruler and said, "Come follow me," he was calling him to a relationship. And so when Abraham went ahead and did what God asked him to do, I mean, all of a sudden, this whole new relationship with God was opened up. Now, he knew that God was sending his son as a sacrifice for his sins and that kind of stuff. And no doubt, he probably sat around the fire with the other guys and such and told his kids and nephews and whatever, kids in the neighborhood about it. And
because he would have understood the sacrificial system. Abraham knew what it pointed to.
Yeah. And so, but now that he had experienced that himself and he knew that that's what God was pointing out to him, can you imagine how the sharing of that story entirely changed? How there was a sparkle and a new life in the sharing of that? Because he knew he was one step closer of what God was actually going to experience when that happened. They created a much deeper relationship with God.
Yeah.
And so...
Because that whole experience was powerful and meaningful. I mean, that was Abraham's ultimate surrender, ultimate step of faith, because it was considered that Abraham knew that Isaac was the child of promise, and even though he would sacrifice him and he would die, he fully believed that, I don't know how God's going to do it, but he'll raise him up from the dead or something, but he's trusting God enough now to, I don't know how he's going to do it, but I know he will do it.
Right, because in the other situations he got himself in, I mean, like, Sarah was past the age of childbearing. I mean, he didn't see how God could do something about that, and so they took it upon themselves to have a kid.
Yeah.
And outside of God's plan, same with saying that Sarah was his sister rather than his wife. I mean, that made a lot of sense to do that, a lot of sense. So, yeah. Anyways, one example in my own life about having personal experience that would change something. Well, I think it was probably at least 8 or 9 years ago, I got a book called Humility by Andrew Murray. It was a really good book. But, I didn't even start reading it till I'd had it almost a year. And so, but then once I started reading it, I couldn't stop reading it for a while. For about 3 months, I did nothing but read that book during morning devotional time. And I must have read it 7 or 8 times in about 3 months. And of course, in the amount of time, plus all the 7 or 8 years after that, I would read some more in it, and I'd underline and double underline and highlight, and then highlight it in a different color.
See, I can't read a pamphlet and not get bored.
And mark down the sides of these paragraphs and everything that had already been double underlined and,
This is amazing to me.
pink highlights and everything, So, but... And each time I read it, of course, there was always a new paragraph and such to get and understand. Well, finally, I get to the point where I start looking at all the white parts. Nothing's underlined, nothing's highlighted.
The unimportant things.
Yeah, and you think, well, this is a really good book and has a lot of depth, but not every single sentence and paragraph can be depth. You gotta have a little, just fluff stuff in there. And but trust me, there's no real fluff in there. He doesn't tell stories that's straight across, just talking about the God things and such. So anyways, I thought, well, you know what? I'll bet you anything, despite how simple these paragraphs or these pages seem to me when I read through them and I can't see the depth, I'll bet you anything they're deeper than anything else in this book. I'm just not getting it. Well, time went on, and like I said, every now and again I'd pick up the book. I picked it up a few months ago, I think, and flipped through it, opened it to some place that had some white on it, and started reading it, get out my pen. I'm like, yes, I get this now. This one simple paragraph, I'd now experienced it. It had new depth. And so that's a whole, just say yes to God, because you have no idea what he can and will do for you, because he's saying, come follow me in this journey that you have no idea what I can do for you.
Yeah, and I was telling Miranda, it's like most of my life. I was the last, I think, of all my friends to get married, and everybody had kids, and when I was pastoring churches, I was youth pastor, and of course they were kids of somebody, and the parents would tell me this is like to have a kid, and they would, and you get this sense of like, oh, well, this is what it's like to have a child, this is what it's like to raise a kid, this is what it's like to have a teenager, and you kind of get into the, where you give parenting advice when you're not a parent, which is a really bad thing to do, so don't do that. And eventually, you kind of feel comfortable with your knowledge of I know what it's like, even though I don't have a kid, I know mostly what it's like because, I've worked with teenagers and I've worked with children, I've worked at summer camps, and you have no clue. Once we had Aspen, it was completely different. This was your child, this was your kid, and everything before that was a shadow of reality.
Yeah, as much as you loved your teenagers, you weren't probably going to stand up and die for them, basically.
Yeah.
You had your own kid, it becomes an entirely different story.
Yeah, if the kid was out there and, he's, save me, and I tried to throw him a laugh ring, but I'm not going out there. Actually I would. Anyway.
He would. He would do that. He would,
But,
yes.
That's what we were talking about earlier, Aspen and I, about summer camp. Anyway, it's completely different when you have your own, and you start to then you realize and you understand the depth of the emotion and the commitment, all that kind of stuff, and it's like, man, I had no idea what I was talking about before. And that's what it's like between theory and practical living it, and you can't have a theoretical relationship with Jesus. It's the real practical relationship that changes everything. In other words, a relationship in my head versus a relationship in my heart.
Yes, just a word of advice to all those who haven't had children and are offering advice. Be prepared to be a good parent yourself.
Yeah.
Take your own advice. My goodness, when my kids were little, I knew a person, and we hung out, we did things together. And every now and again, she would offer parenting advice. And what was kind of funny is any number of years later, when she had her own baby, we'd go out to eat, and I swear she'd bring the diaper bag with her, and yet all of a sudden the baby would spit up, or and the baby was under a year old, the baby would spit up, or need a diaper change, or a bottle or something, and I don't know what she carried around in her bag, but it was none of those things. There was never a spare diaper, never a change of clothes. It was most interesting. So.
Then why carry the bag?
I don't know. But
Just for looks?
I
got a bag.
She had the bag. It looked good,
good.
good parenting, but there was nothing in it.
That's fine.
So no relationship in her bag.
No relationship in her bag.
So anyways, but her child is grown now, and all is well, and it survived.
You got it. If you got it to live, to be an adult, good job.
Yeah. So, so moving on to the disciples. Jesus
right.
washing the disciples' feet, which is where we actually started.
Yeah.
But we had to tell the others to get where we're going. So this is the story where Jesus washes the disciples' feet before he's going to be crucified the next day, right? Mm-hmm. And so having your feet washed by someone back then was pretty customary. Mm-hmm. It was done on a regular basis.
Yeah. And it wasn't ceremonial; it was practical.
Right.
Because the streets were dusty, they were dirty, and there was all kind of nasty things you walked through because there were horses and camels, and they would leave things in the road that you would sometimes step in. And individually, do you know why New York is called the Big Apple?
Well, I do, because you previously told me.
No, we're on camera. You're supposed to say.
No, I didn't know that.
Really?
I forgot my line.
You forgot her line. You blew the whole story. No, we talked about this in the car the other day. Yeah, because the Big Apple, you can see the apple. It had nothing to do with apples. It was because back in the day, New York was such a big city, and there were so many horse-drawn carriages and horses and everything. If you're a horse person, you know that horse manure is sometimes referred to as apples when they're, having their time and, doing number 2 in the street. Oh, it's giving us apples. There's horse apples. And there was so much manure in the streets and stuff, that's why it was called the Big Apple, because there was overrun with horse manure. So when you think of the Big Apple, that's what it really means, not the Macintosh apple. It's horse apples. Nothing to do with what we're talking about. But that's what the disciples would have possibly, that's why they washed their feet, because their feet really would have been nasty. And that's why they used to have a servant come in and wash people's feet.
Right. And so when the disciples here were meeting for what is now known as the Last Supper, they expected to have dinner and have their feet washed.
Because of that.
And yet the servant never showed up to wash their feet. Now, here is...
You gotta wonder if Jesus didn't take the servant aside and said, here's a dog, go get some ice cream. Prepping this for, it's all my imagination that Jesus knew this and wanted to make a teachable. Maybe not, but in my head, he's like, here, go get you something nice.
He could have set it up, obviously, but he could have arranged an angel to distract him or something,
or Jesus putting his arm around here and go get yourself something nice. Come back.
Sure. I mean, could happen.
Anyway.
So you've got the disciples who also have their misconceptions of who Jesus is, what their actual relationship with Jesus
because they're arguing
is.
About it. Yeah.
Yes. Well, first of all, they have this misconception of themselves, is that they cannot be the one who lowers their status by being the one who volunteers to wash everybody else's feet.
Right.
And so, and then also, they still believed that Jesus was going to set up an earthly kingdom, and that they were going to come into power and wear rich robes and live in the palace and be much like the rich young ruler.
Because they believed they were the chosen 12. I mean, they were the ones close to Jesus, and so they believed they still had more of a kingdom corporation frame in mind, like, well, we're going to be the 12, closest in power and stuff. And they would argue amongst themselves who was going to be the more powerful up on the, corporate ladder. And that's why none of them thought, well, our level of leadership doesn't wash feet.
Yeah, I mean, they weren't going to, they were trying to, out of 12 people, you've got the pecking order, and they weren't about to move themselves down to the bottom there. Everybody was trying to maintain the status that they already had. Right. And what's kind of interesting is that they were kind of taking, well, Jesus said, at one point in time, he said, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these other things are going to be added unto you. I mean, anything else that they needed to live in this world. And so, in the meantime, the rich young ruler and the disciples and a lot of other people, we get it backwards. We think that we're going to get the kingdom of God by chasing down all this other stuff first. I mean, the rich young ruler had that idea, and the disciples certainly had that idea because status was part of that, other things. And so now Jesus, he is about to show up and say, come follow me, in a way that they were just going to begin to understand. This was just a beginning, a little step in the right direction. And so he's the one who goes ahead and he pours the water and he washes all of their feet. And he talks about, he's like, I came to serve. And basically, I'm your master and you are to follow my example. Oh, wow. I'm supposed to serve. Whole new concept. Whole new real idea to them. They may have seen Jesus been serving for all that time they've been with him, but they were so focused on Jesus becoming king and they're going to be rulers and leaders and high in status in the whole country, and that this whole thing of being servants blew right on past them. But this was the first step to getting an inkling of that. And that's how Jesus does things. One little step at a time, a new concept of who Jesus really is and who he really created us to be.
Yeah.
So, what?
Big silent pause.
Well, are you, moving on. Yeah. So sometimes we have misconceptions. Or do you have something you're going to say?
Sometimes we have misconceptions, and while it may seem perfect sense to us, I'm just reading.
He's reading.
Yeah.
So things will make perfect sense to us. Well, we have a cat, Fluff, that we rescued. She's not over here right this second because.
All right. Sometimes we see things and it makes sense to us, and we do them, or we go there and we think it's going to be this and that, and sometimes it doesn't turn out that way.
Yeah.
Enter Fluff.
Right, because, so I don't know how she got to be a homeless cat, but she was living here in the neighborhood, our neighborhood, when we moved in. And the neighbors sort of took care of her, but she was a very, very thin cat. So I'm not sure they really fed her in particular. But the one thing that they did for her was they would leave their garage door cracked so that she could go in out of the elements, no doubt. And that garage made her clearly feel very, very safe.
Yeah.
Because even when she was inside, if she heard the neighbor's garage door go up, she wanted outside so that she could go into their garage.
Yeah.
Well, when we would be outside and I'd be doing a little yard work or something, planting some flowers and whatever in pots, I'd open up the garage and she'd like to go in there and snuggle up in some boxes or whatever.
Or explore.
Yeah, or explore. She'd like to take a nap in there, and that was fine. Over the winter, that's great. It's cool in there, and she enjoyed it and such. And later, we'd open the garage and call her out, and it'd be all good. Well, yesterday, we thought Fluff was inside, but apparently she was outside, and Brett opened the garage door to get something out, and Fluff went inside.
Yeah, she went in. We didn't know. I didn't see her go
Yeah.
in. And before I shut the door, she would always meow back. She's a very vocal cat.
Very.
And so she's in the garage, we'd always go, meow, meow, and she'd meow back. I mean, every time. And so I did. I felt like an idiot. I meow to the garage. And I'm sure the guy across the street, what the heck? And she nothing back, nothing back. So I wave at the neighbor, no, I'm not crazy. And shut the garage door. Because we were leaving.
Yeah, we were leaving. Brett had a doctor's appointment, and while he was there, I was going to make a quick trip to Whole Foods and such.
Yeah.
And yeah, that would be in the hottest part of the afternoon.
Yeah, we were gone several hours.
Yeah, well, longer than several hours. We left at 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, you're right. We were gone about 4 hours in the afternoon, 2 to 6.
And when I came back, I opened the garage. She's nowhere in sight. And I opened the garage door, and she doesn't come running out. Other times, whenever I opened the door, she'd been in there, she'd come running out. And nothing, and I meow, nothing. And I just left the garage door open.
Yeah, it was at least an hour later or longer. We were getting pretty worried about her.
So I was like, well, she's not in the garage, or she's dead, one of the two.
Something, yeah. So eventually she meandered on out, I guess, and came inside, but she was wiped out, and she's still wiped out today.
A little bit.
And she's, as Brett says, she's usually very vocal. She's loud.
Yeah.
When she meows, she is loud.
Yeah.
And now she's giving some tiny little mews.
Yeah.
And not terribly interested in going outdoors.
No. She came in, she drank and ate and
Went to bed.
And went to bed.
Yes. And so she had the misconception that the garage is safe. The garage was not safe. Especially not when it's Texas 90-something, 95 or 96 it was yesterday.
Yeah.
So yeah, we often think something is safe and fine to do. In reality, it's not. It's not what we learned it to be. And so Jesus takes us on these little steps. One at a time, we need to say, yes, I am going to follow you. And wow, get to see something whole new. And our relationship with Jesus, which is what Jesus is working on, is our relationship with him. And just going to be all different than we had ever thought it could be.
Yep. And that's what I have to say about them. I was kind of putting the Fluff story together with what we've just been talking about, but now I see it. It's a step-by-step.
Yeah, step by step. It's a journey. And I'm sure Kitty learned something yesterday, we hope.
So what I really liked about today's talk, when we again went over it earlier in the week and stuff, I really liked the part that appealed to me the most, I think, was the idea of giving up, recognizing, I guess, and sacrificing the things that we believe make us who we are, make us, give us our self-identity, whatever it is, And, Jesus was calling Abraham, the rich young ruler, the disciples, all of them, to give those things up and follow him in a relationship, because that's where they would discover who they really were created to be. And that's where we find our true self. That's where we find our true purpose. That's where we find, really, the place in life, and I've said this in all of my Bible classes, you want to be the happiest in life, find that talent that, God created you with and use it to make the world a better place. And that's where your biggest joy will come from, because God created us all to be in a relationship with Him and to use our talents to help others and change the world. And that's the discovery you get when you're able to go, I'm not my money, I'm not the things I do, I'm not the sum total of my accomplishments, I am what I discover in my relationship with God.
Absolutely.
And that's what
And
she
that's
has
what
to
I
say
have to
about
say
that.
about that.
Yes. If you don't know, that's from Forrest Gump, and that's what I have to say about that. So, anyway, I like today's topic. I generally really like that point. It's always been a favorite topic of mine, finding your true self in a relationship. Because, as a teacher, I was never going to make bank. But I
don't know what our bank account recognizes.
yeah, that's right.
Our bank account recognizes that.
Yeah.
It does recognize that.
that. But it's what you were called to do, and it's what you're happiest doing. That's
And it really doesn't matter if our bank account recognizes it or not. It's one of those things where you follow Jesus and He always takes care of you.
You may not be wealthy, but you'll certainly have joy, because wealth doesn't always equal joy. That's a whole other topic. Anyway, before we get off on some other tangent, that was our show for today.
Show the show.
I know, I was just kidding. That was our show for today. And next week we'll be talking about something else.
Yes, haven't arrived there yet.
Haven't arrived there yet.
All brand new next week, except we're probably still in John.
Yeah.
And probably still talking about Come Follow Me. It's evolved.
Yes.
Yes, the Come Follow Me has evolved.
I'll give you some more useless information about random things in the world like toast, and where it came from, and
Yes.
how we got to where we are today.
And may you enjoy your toast this
Yes.
week exactly like you like it.
Yes. Try the avocado and banana. That's really, really good, by the way. And we will compare recipes next week. So have a great rest of your Sabbath, and